What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the overall markets. I'm also going to break down why we got some bearish catalysts that came out overnight that caused the market to switch directions, and why we're seeing some new developments when it comes to the data that's coming out. But just note that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Weeble link. If you deposit any amount of money, you're guaranteed 12 free stocks. If you deposit $500, you're guaranteed 20 in total. And deposit $25,000 or more, and you're guaranteed 75. The offer ends very soon, in just about 3 weeks from now. Anyways, now let's talk about the market. So the market was trying to rebound on Friday, looking very, very strong. And then we got some bad news overnight. A lot of bad news came out that caused the market to slow down. Then we got this dump because of more overnight bad news. So with the way the market moves, you have to be prepared for anything if you are trading. And that's why I always talk about support and resistance levels. I mentioned to everyone in my video yesterday as well, if we had lost 570, I would flip more bearish. If we held above that, we would remain more bullish. And instead, we ended up losing support. And that's where your guys' job comes, where you have to be able to kind of adapt to this. That's what the job of a trader is. Not everything is going to be fixated in one direction all the time. Sometimes unexpected pieces of news could come out. So what happened? So the answer was Apple led the market down because we got a big downgrade overnight. We saw analysts saying that they see the share price declining, and there was a lot of negative talk about that. That caused Apple to dump. And then as a result, we saw SPY follow that. There's also been a lot of uncertainties by the Fed. So we saw Cash Kari come out. He was saying that the risks favor unemployment going up. And he did mention that the economy is very resilient, but we have to be careful with unemployment, and the market did not like that. And then we saw crude oil end up jumping more than 3% because the world is just waiting to see if Israel is going to strike back at Iran. So a lot of uncertain news has come out, and the market ended up just dipping a bit in the fear. I just want to mention that if Israel does end up, doing that to Iran in retaliation, and just know that this, the whole situation goes back many years. I'm not saying it's starting with this side or this side. I'm just trying to say that this goes back many years, and we just have to talk about the current events. If that were to happen, if all the stuff that happened, which led to this potential retaliation attack, does happen, what's going to happen is Iran's oil supplies are going to be very disrupted, and then that could have a big effect on crude oil, at least in general. It could also affect the US markets. That's why it's very, very important for us to know about that. It's going to affect oil exports, and then that's going to affect the broader markets. So that's the reason why the market's a little bit uncertain. Even if the market looks bullish one day, it could always completely flip in a flash if we get some new news. And that's something you have to remember about day trading. Sometimes unexpected things could happen, so you have to be open-minded nonetheless. That's why you need to use stops and manage risks, because once again, there is risks involved in trading. But as long as you manage risks and you learn to time your entries a lot more efficiently, the future still remains bright, guys. So I want to make that very, very clear. So, anyways, with that kind of like addressed, what's happening with the markets going into tomorrow, it's going to be Tuesday, October 8th, 2024. We have Kugler giving a speech in the morning. Then we have a couple more Fed speakers like Bostic, Collins, and Jefferson. And then the only pieces of data that are coming out are going to be the Business Optimism Index report at 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. We'll look for some volatility for the Economic Optimism report. But everything is very minor. It's all very, very minor data. Data gets more serious starting on Wednesday. So crude oil went up as a result of all the fears. And also for today, we had the very important workshops by Nvidia's AI Summit, excuse me. And what's going to happen is starting tomorrow, they're going to be having their conferences. So we're going to be listening to what Nvidia has to say about the new products. That could affect the share price to some extent, so we'll see about that. Also know that tomorrow is going to be Prime Day for Amazon. And then for Thursday, we have the Robotaxi event for Tesla, which is going to be very exciting. I can't wait to see what they announce. For earnings, there's not much coming out, but we do have JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, and BlackRock announcing earnings for Friday. In terms of data right now, the market is still quite greedy because we're still not that far from all-time highs, right? We're still 6-7 points away, which is not that crazy. We're about 1% away from all-time highs on the S&P 500. Momentum is currently neutral right now, kind of in the middle. And we also have the puts and call option ratio is currently at greed, so that's making up the majority of sentiment, with volatility quite neutral as well. So the VIX is trying to break out right here, which tends to be more bearish for the markets. We'll be watching to see if that ends up being the case. So what is my view for tomorrow, guys? So we got a lot of negative news involving, Israel and Iran, a lot of fear in the oil industry. There's also a lot of fear involving the Fed because of what Cash Kari said. And there's some uncertainty. So that's the reason why the market dipped a little bit. The question is what's going to happen from this point on? And it's very simple. So we do have a tendency of getting bought up between 565 and 567 on SPY. Okay. So if we get bought back up, you need to reclaim 570 to turn back to bullish. But if we can't hold above 570, the odds are now flipping the opposite direction, and we could be dipping even more. If we decline and we can't hold around that like 565 zone, 565 to 566, expect this thing to dump all the way down to about the gap fill, taking us all the way down to about that 560 area. So it's going to be a big rug pull on SPY if we can't hold our key support. I drew this out earlier. I don't have it drawn out right now, but we are also in a rising wedge like structure approaching the election. So I wouldn't be surprised if that does end up failing. So you want to be very, very careful with that. So the daily 20 EMA is at 566. If that fails us, we have this gap to fall all the way down to the lower 560s. So far, we look a little bit more bearish on SPY. I think we might decline a little bit more, but there's no confirmation the market's officially going to reject and turn really bearish. If we lose 565, I will turn a lot more bearish, but if we don't, this could try to hold up. So we'll be watching to see if that ends up being the case. And it's very, very simple. If we reclaim 570 tomorrow, we turn back up. If we lose 565 tomorrow, we're looking for 560, then 557 as our target down towards our 200 EMA. So overall, we have a bearish looking structure on SPY. We tried to rebound last week only to fail because of more bad news. So the uncertainty involving Israel and Iran and oil prices, uncertainty from the Fed about unemployment is leading the market to being a little bit more fearful. That's part of why we're dipping. We also saw Aapl lead the way with the downgrade, so that's why the market looks a little bit more bearish. So tomorrow, expect 565 potentially. If that does not hold, that's when the market's going to flip. And that's when you have the opportunity to once again watch this potentially start dipping. And you could once again, make a lot of money on the way down. But if we reclaim 570, we could try to turn back up. There's still a potential possibility of that. So we'll see. I want to mention that SPY had a rising wedge, and we also happen to have a head and shoulders like structure. Generally, this does favor downside. So this technically is starting to look weaker, but we need confirmation first. So we'll be watching for that for tomorrow. That's why there's going to be a big test, but this chart still favors downside a little bit more. Now, we were trying to rebound on ES. You guys can see yesterday we were trying to hold support very nicely. And then we got some bad news again involving crude, involving Aapl, and now this ended up failing. So we have this big gap all the way down here on the 4-hour time frame. We have kind of like a head and shoulders as well. It's developing. If we reclaim 57.70, we could turn back up. If we fail to do that, we're looking for 57.25 as our support. If that fails, I think we go all the way down to the 56.80 area. With the head and shoulders, I think the odds favor the 5700 and then 5680 area. So the odds still favor the downwards direction. As far as Tesla goes, Tesla looks a little bit more bearish. Unfortunately, Tesla got some bad news. One of their general managers has left. And then there's also news about how Geico is not going to be essentially supporting and covering the Cybertruck anymore. So it's not the best of news. And then Tesla got a downgrade from, I think it was JP Morgan. So they're getting downgrades. We're seeing some negative news that's coming out for Tesla. And then the whole market's also dragging Tesla down. That's why Tesla's turned back to bearish. Tesla could dip a little bit more, but once we get closer to the Robotaxi event, this could attempt to bounce. But for now, we might not be ready yet. We got a weak close and the odds do favor downside. So look at 240 as our support. If that fails us, we're looking for 238. And if that fails, this is going to dump all the way down closer to the lower 230. So I want to give you guys a warning about this head and shoulders like structure. If we reclaim 247, we could try to bounce, but I think this is favoring a downwards move and the downwards direction. So look for that gap below and just know that there is some downside potential on Tesla. For Nvidia is trying to rebound right over here. So I think that with this very, very nice looking structure, we have a nice looking inverse head and shoulders. But the issue with Nvidia is that we have this tough resistance, around 131. 131, then 136. So looking at the structure, there's a double bottom right here. I think it's possible Nvidia tries to push a little bit higher to retest the highs around 131. If we break that, we could go all the way up to about this 132.5 area. It could go a little bit higher. But then with the whole market slowing down, this could slow Nvidia down. There would be a risk of it dipping as well. So we could push a little bit more to 130 to 132. And then we'll be watching to see if there's a rejection. So watch for that very, very carefully. For Bitcoin's starting to slow right over here. We're looking for basically 62,650. If that fails us, we're looking for a dip back down to 61,800. If we break past 64,000, we could try to push, but overall, this is looking a little bit weaker. And there's a risk of this dipping back down to about 62,650 to start declining. So watch to see if that ends up being the case. I think we could be dipping right over here, and we'll be very, very patient nonetheless. For NQ has a nice inverse cup and handle like structure. We also have a head and shoulders. If we break past 20,070, we could turn back up. And if we fail to do so, we're going to likely decline all the way down to about 19,800. 19,800 is a very, very strong possibility. So we'll see if that ends up being the case. We look a little bit weaker on NQ as we made a lower high here. We look like we're turning over. We still have this gap down here to fill. So now it's trying to turn a little bit more bearish if we can't reclaim 20,000. So if we could reclaim 20,070, we will turn back up. If we can't, the odds are favoring these lows being tested. It is now favoring that because of how oil is being affected in the uncertainty about the markets. So be very mindful of that, especially as Apple led the way down. We also have the QQQ looking a little bit more bearish. We have this gap to fill down here. I'm thinking the odds are favoring that gap fill if we can't hold above 480. If we reclaim 482, we could bounce for 485. But if we lose 480, we're looking for 475 as our support. So watch and see if that ends up being the case and be very, very patient nonetheless. For Apple looks a little bit more bearish as we have a double top leg structure. If we manage to reclaim 222, we could be trying to push back up for this imbalance fill for 225. But overall, we'll be watching to see if we end up approaching 220. If that fills us, we'll be dipping all the way down towards the 218 area. So there's a good chance we might be dipping towards that. We have a nice double top leg structure, and we have these imbalances to fill below. So Apple's looking a little bit weaker. We got a big downgrade, unfortunately. And we also saw a lot of negative sentiment. Unfortunately, that's slowing Apple down. So that's why we're dropping. So that's also why the market ended up dipping. So be very mindful of that. So that alongside seasonality are all panning out together. And that's why the market ended up seeing a dip. For Palantir, we tried to push up to 40. I mentioned everyone this might decline a bit for 38.5. And I said we might try to bounce off this. In this case, look for a dip for 38.5. If we bounce off that, we could attempt to get back up to those levels. But if we don't, we're looking for 37.5 as our target. I think there's a risk of that potentially happening. So watch for that. For Supermicro, we have resistance around this 48 area. If this double bottom pans down and we keep breaking above 48, we're looking for 50 as our next target. If 48 rejects, we're going to be dipping back down towards the 45.8 area. So watch and see how we end up reacting right over here. I think we could be testing this resistance at 48.5. If that breaks, we're going back up to 50. So that's always a strong possibility. I'm favoring that it might get very close to about 50, and then we'll see if it rejects or not. We're at some tough resistance, but give this the time it needs. For other factors out there, we also have Rivian. Rivian's on a bit of a decline, but this might try to at least hold up around these very, very key levels. We're looking for basically resistance around 10.6. If that breaks, we're looking for 11.2. I think we might be testing 10.6 tomorrow. We'll see if you reject off that or not. But this imbalance does favor it, trying to go up to about 10.8. Then we will see if you reject. So look for a little bit of a bounce. 10.6 to 10.8 could be coming. Then we'll see if you reject. It's very tight, not really doing much. SoFi has some tough resistance around 8.5. If we break that, we could be pushing higher. If not, we're at risk of declining all the way down to 8.05. I think there's a good chance that this might end up declining, so watch and see how things end up going. So 8.05 becomes a stronger possibility. For the IWM, we look a little bit more bearish as we're starting to decline. If we break 218, we'll be looking for that gap fill above to 219. If we end up losing 215, we're looking for a dip. My gut tells me the IWM is on a bit of a downtrend right here, and we could be declining closer to about 215, if not the gap fill down to 212. So this tries favoring downside for the 215s, and we'll see how things end up going from here. So be very patient nonetheless. For AMD, AMD is trying to push a little bit higher. We're looking for basically 172 as our resistance. If that ends up failing, we're looking for a decline all the way back down towards 168. If that bounces, we're looking for a push to fill the gap up above towards this 175 area. So we'll see how things end up going. But overall, I just want to say that AMD has some tough resistance around 172, and this could decline back down towards 168. So be very mindful of that. We're going to consolidate for a bit before we start to slow. ARM is trying to push with Nvidia, but be careful because we got this liquidity grab up here. If we lose 140, we're looking for 137.5 as our target. If we hold this, we could rebound, but as of right now, we're looking for 140 as our support, and we'll see how we end up reacting to that. For Coinbase, we're kind of rejecting here as well. Unfortunately, we ended up seeing this following the trend that Bitcoin is on, and we weren't able to kind of like hold the way we're moving. We got an equal weight rating from Barclays, which is not bad, but the issue I see is the fact that we got this rejection here. We have to reclaim 170 tomorrow. If it does not do that, this is at risk of coming down to these lows all the way down to 163 again, so be very mindful of that. For Amazon looks a little bit more bearish. We have a head and shoulders like structure, but we have not lost 180 yet. That's also previous resistance becoming support. If 180 fails us, we're going down to 178. If 180 holds, we're looking for 182.93 is our next target. So watch to see if 180 holds. Do we go up to almost 183 or do we end up failing? It all depends on 180. There's going to be a big test on this. There is a head and shoulders developing on Amazon despite the fact that Prime Day is tomorrow. So the chart is still kind of like favoring the downside. Unfortunately, that looks a little bit more probable to me. For other factors out there, we have Meta. Meta has support around this 182 area. The support is going to be watched right over there. If 180, 4, sorry, 582, not 182, 582 is going to be our support. If that fails us, we're looking for basically a test of about this previous resistance around 577. And then below that, we have 570 coming next. So it looks a little bit more bearish so far after this liquidity grab. And if 582 ends up failing, this might tip a little bit more. So we'll see how things end up going with that. For Microsoft, we're on a bit of a decline right over here. If we manage to reclaim 410, we're looking for a bounce back up towards this 415 area. If we end up not holding around 409, we could be declining all the way down towards this gap fill around 402. So there's going to be a risk of some downside on Microsoft. For Google, basically have this 165 areas our resistance. If that breaks, we're looking for 166.6. If we can't hold above that, we're looking for a decline back down to this gap fill towards 163. With a double top leg structure, I think the odds favor 163 is the most likely case. For DJT, we're trying to push a little bit higher. We have a nice inverse head and shoulders like structure. It's trying to hold up very nicely. This may attempt to get up to about that 20.5 area if we get back above 19. If we don't break 19, which is where we have this resistance, we could be declining back down to about 17. So if 19 rejects, we're looking for 17 as our target. If 19 breaks, we're going up to 20.5. This is favoring that it wants to break 19, push for 20.5, but we'll see if that ends up being the case. That really depends on if we could hold up. Now, one issue for the broader markets is the fact that the VIX has a double bottom is trying to break out right here. If the VIX gets back above 24, this could start pushing for the 30s, and that's going to be bearish for the markets. As of right now, the VIX is starting to turn bullish, and that could slow us down, so we'll see how things end up going. As of right now, the 10 year is trying to push. This is going to be dependent on the FOMC minutes coming out on Wednesday, so as of right now, it's bullish. And then the dollar, this has been basically pushing as well. If the dollar continues this pump, as we're forming a flag here and it starts breaking out above 102.5, that could also be bearish for the markets. So the market unfortunately got some bad news, especially the news that came out overnight, and the market's starting to decline. The odds do favor the downwards direction, but it's not a 110% guarantee yet. We have to watch for confirmation if we lose key support. If that ends up being the case, we're looking for a decline. If not, we will be very, very patient. So that being said, I thank you all so much for listening. I hope you guys have a very, very awesome day. Just know that SPY and ES still have some gaps to fill, and the odds do favor downside, but we need to watch for confirmation just to be safe. So let's wait and see what happens with the data coming out for tomorrow and the Fed speakers, not to mention the fact that we have some big events coming out. We have AI's conferences starting for the AI summits, and then we also happen to have, that's for Nvidia, by the way. And then we also have Amazon Prime Day tomorrow, followed by Tesla's very important robotaxi event for Thursday. So we'll see how all those things end up affecting the markets. But with that being said, I just wanted to really say that I really appreciate you guys so much for watching these videos. And please remember a couple of things, okay? Sometimes the market could be very tricky, and I can't call every single move the market is going to make. I would have loved to see another attempt to push, which would have been a very good shorting opportunity. The odds did favor that yesterday because the charts were looking quite nice. We didn't really get too many negative catalysts. But then overnight, right, if there's a new pandemic or if something happens, something the complete opposite could happen when you least expect it. So sometimes that could happen, and that's what kind of like happened overnight with the Aapl downgrade, with the news involving Israel and all these other things, like the fear that was kind of like incited by the Fed. So I just want to make it very clear. Sometimes that happens, and that's why you have to be able to watch your levels. That's why I go over the bullish and bearish cases so that you guys could know if you want to exit or if you want to continue to hold. That's up to you guys. But my job here is just to give you guys warnings and tell you guys about what the charts are greatly favoring. I'm not right all the time, but I am right the majority of the time statistically. So I hope that I've provided value for you guys. And I just want you guys to know that the market could flip in an instant when things happen that you least expect. So I just want to say once again, I appreciate you guys for your attentions. Please have an absolutely incredible rest of the day. I'll be back tomorrow morning before the market opens to report on how the data is looking. Until then, I hope you guys take care and peace out.